Welcome to the 17th treatise delivered this 5th day of July 2020. We shall basically be delving onto the issue of the role of the Supreme Court insofar as the building of democracy is concerned. Now, today's treatise is informed by the happenings in Malawi, where, as we saw, the Supreme Court annulled the election of President-elect Mutharika, Professor Mutharika, and the consequent result was the rerun, which ultimately led to the victory of Dr. Chakwera as the new president of Malawi. Of course, secondly, we shall also be looking into events that are happening within the judiciary in Kenya, and I have in mind the apparent belittlement of the institution of the office of the Chief Justice. And what we intend to bring out is the core role that the judiciary in these two jurisdictions have played, and particularly in Kenya, insofar as reinvigorating and setting the standards so that our democracy can have its place. And to take off, I would want to first relook into the decision of the Supreme Court of Malawi, the Supreme Appeal Court of Malawi, in petition number 1 of 2020, the case of Professor Mutharika and others versus Dr. Chakwera and two others, where the petition, the appeal as filed by the former president, was dismissed, and the court proceeded to uphold the decision of the High Court sitting as a constitutional court, which ordered a rerun, and which eventually was so the opposition candidate succeeding to the helm of the presidency. And one point that came out handy, and which I think is important in terms of jurisprudence from the decision of the Malawi Supreme Court of Appeal, was their explanation, their definition, and their description of the essence of elections, why elections are so important within the democratic cycle. And it's important to note that they stated that in as much as democracy has got so many tenets, one of the core tenets of a democracy, actually the most critical one that is noted by all and sundry, is the fact that democracy comes hand in hand with regular elections which must be free and fair. And that court did state that why elections must always be held and why elections must be seen to be free and fair is the fact that it results into the donation of the people's sovereign power. And particularly when we talk of the president, then we are envisaging a situation where the people would definitely be vesting so much power to be exercised on their behalf by one individual. The court went further to, in fact, state that an election of a president would be tantamount to the express definition of what can be seen as, or what can be described as, internal self-rule, where you are surrendering your right for some period of time to an individual. And the court went further to state that it is such elections are so critical, they are so important, as the entire country participates in the process, and it's such that such a process must not be bungled. Why? Because in the end of the day, it is that process that confers legitimacy on they that have been voted into office. Such is the central role, such is the core role, such is the very important duty that is played by elections, and more so the reason as to why we must at all costs ensure that whenever we go into elections, the said must be seen to be free and fair. The same must be such that whoever wins has the legitimacy, whoever loses has that, must be in a position to accept that that was the will of the people, and that can only be done if that election is seen to be free and fair. Now, going to the gist, I want us to appreciate the current Supreme Court headed by the Chief Justice Maraga for the robust decision that was handed by the Kenyan Supreme Court in the Raila Odinga petition of 2017, and that will be one of the lasting legacies of that Supreme Court. It will be one of the lasting legacies of the current Chief Justice. I mean, even if we were to forget about him, but there are certain core things that must always remain in the mind of Kenyans. In as much as we forget things so fast, but let us always remember that that Supreme Court created yardsticks. It created standards upon which the Kenyan elections must always be held. That Supreme Court came up with an authoritative position in terms of what can be described as a caste vote. That Supreme Court came up with an authoritative position in terms of what is a burden of proof. What is the standard in terms of burden of proof before an election can be impeached or otherwise. And finally, that Supreme Court came up with an authoritative position in terms of what are the conditions, what are the yardsticks upon which an election can be impeached, upon which an election can be annulled. Now, it is these four yardsticks that Supreme Court in the Raila Odinga presidential petition 2017, the yardsticks that it came with, that I just want to address in today's treatise so that you can get to grasp and understand how elections in Kenya are expected to be held. Now, on the first yardstick, that the decision by the court authoritatively addressed the standards upon which elections in Kenya are expected to be held. And of course, in respect to that presidential election, the court reinforced the standards as captured in Article 38 of our Constitution, as read together with Article 81 and Article 86. Remember that Article 38 basically brings in the aspects of elections being a political right. It's something that is enshrined in the Constitution. It is a human right. It is so central. It's captured in the Constitution, and it's such that the sovereign will, the fact that a person has voted and that vote counts, is one that must ultimately be reflected in the outcome of an election. And that secondly, even as you do that, we must also bear in mind, we also need to bear in mind the fact that the same must be read when bearing in mind also Article 81 and Article 86 of the Constitution. Now, Article 81 sets out the principles under which the said elections are expected to be held. And Article 86 creates, or rather brings in the fact that the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, that is the IEBC, is a duty bearer in terms of ensuring that those principles as outlined in Article 81 are actually emasculated, are actually seen to have been implemented and carried out in that particular election. And what are these principles? Now, that court authoritatively stated that in any such elections, of course, the entire election must be seen, the entire election process must be seen to be simple. It must not be complex. It must be something that is easily understandable. Secondly, the election must be such that the entire system, the results, the documentation, verifiable. Yeah, it must be such that the election can be easily verified. Yeah, the court also did state that it must be accurate. Yeah, the IBC ought to ensure that the results as presented are accurate as much as possible. They must reflect the will of the people as represented when casting the ballot. Of course, it must also be secure, the entire electoral document, the fact that you have voted, the ballot papers, everything must be secure during and even after the election. And then, of course, there's also the aspect of accountability and transparency in the entire process. It should be such that even after the election, the entire system must be in a position to be freely and easily audited for purposes of accountability, because remember, the IEBC is publicly funded. It is the money, is the Kenyan taxpayers' money that funds the IEBC when carrying out that election, such that it must be that even after doing that which it has been mandated constitutionally to do, then any Kenyan or Kenyans, when they need, must be in a position to easily carry out an audit of the process, so that you find that these are the principles which that court established must guide elections in Kenya, and that is the position. Secondly, we also talked of the aspect of the burden of proof. I mean, what is the burden of proof when when you are challenging a presidential election? And that court heavily addressed that. It heavily addressed that issue, and in fact, in its final decision, it basically reinforced its decision in the Raila petition 2013, where it said that the standard in terms of the burden of proof should be slightly above the standard in civil cases, which is on a balance of probabilities, but of course lower than the standard in criminal cases, which is basically on beyond any reasonable doubt. But of course, even as we address that aspect of standard as captured in the Kenyan Supreme Court, it's also important to note that the burden, the court found that the burden will always keep shifting, such that in as much as it's vested on the person who alleges the petitioner, but once you have raised such issues, then the burden will then now shift to the IEBC and the other respondents to now to defray the burden that you have raised. Of course, before I move from that, it is important to note that if you look at the decision by the Malawi Supreme Court of Appeal on the aspect of the burden of proof, the court made an interesting finding that because elections are captured in the Constitution as constitutional rights, then it would not be fair to have a burden which is slightly higher than in civil matters. That court found that that would then mean that you may disenfranchise a citizen, you may compromise the rights of a citizen, and for that reason the Supreme Court in Malawi settled for the fact that the burden of proof must just be on the balance of probabilities as in civil matters. But of course, the position in so far as the Kenyan Supreme Court decision is concerned is as I have already stated. In addition to that, we also find that that court also made a robust decision insofar as what exactly amounts to a caste vote. And you see, that is a critical question, because we have known that elections in Kenya, particularly where there are malpractices, has been mired by instances where you have stuffed ballots in ballot boxes. I mean, and especially in scenarios where you have exceedingly high numbers of spoiled votes. And that is a question that was presented before that court as to whether such votes could also count when it comes to tallying of the final result. And that court authoritatively established that when you talk of cast vote, it meant the valid vote, the votes that have been verified and so are valid votes. And finally, on the fourth threshold, in terms of the finding of the Supreme Court of Kenya, the court also addressed itself conclusively on the question of the threshold before annulment of a presidential election in Kenya, and of course it would also apply even to the other elections, and this was in respect of the interpretation of Section 83 of the Elections Act, which is in two limbs. And the first limb, of course, states that an election shall be annulled where the petitioner has demonstrated that the election substantially offended the principles as enshrined in the Constitution and in any written law. And of course, the second limb is that the petitioner shall succeed where he or she demonstrates that inasmuch as the election substantially complied with the principles, but there were numerous irregularities and illegalities which affected the ultimate, the final result, as it were. And you know, this was a seriously contentious question, because the question was that these two limbs of the of Section 83 of the Election Act, do they have to be looked into disjunctively or conjunctively? Do you have to demonstrate both, or is it that if you demonstrate one, then it will be enough? It is important, and you know, we need to bear this in mind, because that was the finding and it's the position in law now as we speak. The Supreme Court of Kenya authoritatively found and decided that a petitioner would need to prove any of the two limbs. You don't have to prove two. Of course, the first limbs in terms of substantive compliance is important. Why? Because as the court found, an election is a process. It's not an event. An election commences right from the time of registration of voters. Yeah, it goes on during the times of recruitment of political party candidates, and then of course it will the same would also apply during the process of the actual voting, the tallying of the results, the declaration of the results, and of course subsequently the dispute settlement mechanism that follows. So that is a process which, if you can demonstrate has been infringed substantially, then that election can be invalidated. Of course, next, the court also looked into, under the second limb, we are talking of irregularities. Under irregularities, we have such things as where you find, for example, that you have electoral forms that are not serialized, electoral forms that are for no apparent reasons not even marked, signed by the requisite, the relevant officers. Then that limb, even on that alone, if you can demonstrate that the errors and irregularities are as such that they may ultimately affect the result of the election, then on that basis the election would be nullified. And that fourth aspect that we have addressed, you realize its core, because different jurisdictions have interpreted that aspect differently. It is important to note that within the American jurisdiction, and interesting jurisprudence has come out, and in fact that is what the jurisprudence that ordinarily carried the day, the jurisprudence that was held in the case of Bush versus Gore, where the court of course was emphatic that courts must not have a role and as it were be seen to be seeking to interfere with an election, and in this case an election of a president, which must be left purely to the political process, the will of the people as they cast their votes. Like we say in Kenya, the vote cast by Wanjiku. And it is also important to note that the context in which that American decision was delivered must